I scoured the internet again to find trade rumors and potentials for the Chicago Bulls, so you didn't have to. And we'll get into it right after this. Now listen, if you're new to the channel, it's your boy PK from Windy City Breeze. We talk Chicago sports at Chicago Talks. This time we're actually talking about different trades that I think would be interesting and maybe not a lot of people have thought about. And it got kind of interesting when as I went down with it. I want to sit there and preface it by saying this. None of these things, all of this is speculation at this point. We have no idea exactly who's going to be moved. We have an inkling that Vooch is going to re-sign with us. I think that's a great move. We know that we've given Zach the contract, 27, 28 years old. You roll with him 215. He's top 10 at his position. Vooch is top 10 at his position. And realistically, the only person that we see kind of doesn't fit the time frame of winning and everything like that, just based off his age and where he is and how we need to move the needle, I think is DeRozan. And so all these trade scenarios revolve around him. How we can actually utilize his ability, him being an all-star, like he's still a really good player. Really good player. But there's a couple teams who can actually use what he does or utilize him in a way that will get them over the hump and be in more of a win now situation while giving us pieces that would allow the Chicago Bulls to be relevant. So let's get into that real quick. And I want you to understand this. It was a couple of teams, about 4 teams that really came to mind, but it's 2 teams in particular that I thought realistically not only would potentially bite at it, but could potentially go all in on these particular trades. And I looked for teams who had good talent, but were either in a win now situation or a blow it up situation. And in that spectrum, I found one team in the win now situation, ironically being the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors they have always been in a win now scenario. Ever since they started the Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, their big 3, kind of run, they've always done things to make sure that they can stay competitive now and win as many championships as possible before ultimately they just can't continue it. And I respect it. Not only has it proven beneficial, I mean, they've won, I think, 4 in the last 8 years? Yeah, 4 in the last, since 2015. So they've won 4 in the last 8 years. They've pretty much dominated a large part of the last, 8 to 10 years. Hats off to him, right? And so as we see that era slowly coming to its end, and we all see it on the horizon, we know Bob Myers is left. We also see talent and things on this particular team that doesn't necessarily fit the mold for win now, but could be very beneficial later. And one of those pieces is actually Jonathan Kuminga. I don't know why Steve Kerr didn't utilize him more. There's a lot there. And there's some other pieces on the Warriors that would actually make this work and be more palatable. But Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins, essentially, to me, could be the same player. Jonathan Kuminga is about 50% from the field, about 37% from 3. So, and when it comes to things that we need on the Chicago Bulls, he does it. He defends at a high level. He can score, big body, big defender. I mean, he gets to the cup. He's a developing 3-level scorer, in my opinion, from what I see from the time that he gets. He just doesn't get enough playing time. And according to Shams, that's what his representation is actually going to the Warriors about. He's not getting enough playing time. He wants to be in a more prominent and starting role. And him being on those teams, champion teams around that talent, actually could prove to be beneficial for the Chicago Bulls. Now, where does DeMar DeRozan fit in on this one? Obviously, we know DeMar makes more. DeMar is also at a situation where if he's going to go to a different team, he's probably in the win now situation. Now, he's already given and had an interview with Draymond about not wanting to go to the Warriors and things of that nature in the past. However, I think this is a different situation. One, I don't know how much he can actually control that decision. On top of that, now seeing that he's toward the later years in his career, I can see it working out and not being a bad thing. The Warriors are not the same dominant Warriors of the past. So the moniker is not going to be the same. if they win, no one's going to sit there and say, oh, you have to go with Steph to do that. I don't think they would, because now we see the mortality in what the Golden State Warriors are. Klay is not as a shell of himself. Draymond is obviously up and down. Steph is really the only dominant force there. He's Steph, right? Greatest shooter of all time. But DeMar DeRozan feels a need for them that Klay can no longer feel, in my opinion. And if you looked at the last playoff series, Game 6 Klay, it's not Game 6 Klay. That doesn't mean he's not a good player. But the injuries he sustained, the way they play, stuff like that, it's taking a toll, and you can kind of see it. I hope he bounces back. But, you compare injuries as well as getting older, it may be one of those things where Klay cannot do the things he did in the past. And that's not a bad thing. It happens to every player eventually, but even more so with those who've sustained the injuries he sustained. So it's not a bad thing. And DeMar would kind of fit in that role. Now, obviously, the money doesn't work. It's not an apples-to-apples conversation. But if you really look at what Jonathan Kuminga brings to the table, what he actually does, and the role that DeMar would be filling for them, how you make the other money work and the other pieces you would include in some a particular trade like that makes sense. Kuminga would be a great pairing. By the way, Kuminga has been on the Warriors. He's been used in 3 different positions, from a 2 all the way to 2, 3, and 4. So he can slide in that scale, and he would fit in well with what we do here. Now, some people will sit there and say, but that's what we have Patrick Williams for. That's the gamble, and it depends on where you will put Patrick Williams. Frankly, because I know that I don't know whether not DeMar DeRozan, but Andre Drummond is going to re-sign, things of that nature. I don't mind a lineup potentially of, Zach, P. Will, Jonathan Kuminga, and Vooch. I think that's a really good lineup if we have the development or the leap that we expect P. Will to take. I expect Jonathan Kuminga to come in and actually get buckets and do what he does, and that puts a positive pressure on P. Will. I think you kind of need that there. P. Will's role on the Bulls hasn't really been challenged, so to speak. And I think that if you've ever played any organized sport, you kind of need that edge there. I was really challenging him for that particular spot. He's kind of like definitively that. I think this would add that. It may even better both players. And so that is one of those things that was very interesting to me. And I want to hear your thoughts on it, man. Listen, this is silly season. We know it. But I think that a potential trade for DeMar to the Warriors, for Jonathan Kuminga, and 2 other pieces. I know that they have a point guard. I don't know what Dante DiVincenzo's contract looks like. But if you can include him, I think that actually solves our point guard situation as well. Not saying that he's a better point guard than Lonzo or better, even has a higher ceiling than Ayo, but if you look at what he's done at backing up Steph and things of that nature, knockdown shooter, I mean, most of the point guards we're going to be looking at are going to be somewhat of a liability defensively, but he really does hold his own. He's a really solid player. I can see that happening because the Warriors are in a situation where they have a lot of talent at their at key positions for them. They have a lot of talent at the point guard position. Steph's a point guard. Jordan Poole's technically point guard, shooting guard. They have the talent there. So divesting of some of those pieces while gaining someone like DeMar actually allows them to be competitive, and it won't be someone I don't like. If you're worried about, this makes them championship contenders again, the only time I'd actually have to worry about that is in the finals if I see them. Send them out west. We can do what we do. And that's just what that is. But again, I want to hear your thoughts on it. I think that's something that could work. I'm not saying it's the end all be all. And I'm not saying that it's the best trade option there. But it is the one that makes sense based off of the talent that's there, the rumors of those of that particular talent wanting to leave, the other pieces that they have that they could actually include in that particular trade, and sending DeMar back closer to his hometown and put him in a situation where he has an opportunity to be a part of an organization that's trying to win now so that he's not part of another rebuild or retool like we are currently. And I think that's the best thing for him. But again, I want to hear your thoughts. Second team is actually on the East Coast, excuse me. And it's one of those teams that I've actually mentioned before. It's a player I've actually mentioned before. I've actually been really high on this player since he's been drafted. Now, before anyone says, because some of you all who've been P1s, you know who I'm about to say. But this particular player, I think, had his career derailed by another legendary player. And that player for me is Kyle Kuzma. Kyle Kuzma is on a very, very team-friendly deal right now. I mean, I think it was 3-year, $39 million. He's definitely worth more than that. There's many people who are going to challenge that. Have at it. The market is the market. You look at his numbers, you look at his production, you look at what he does on a nightly basis, and you look at what he gets paid, and you compare that to other people who are in the same position, what they get paid, he should be getting paid a lot more. Now, I'm not saying he's a $150 million player over 4 like type player, but he's definitely closer to the higher end of 80, 90, 100 million over 3 or 4. Like, he's definitely worth that type of money for what he does and what he can do. And again, I saw when he was actually on the Lakers and his first couple seasons with the Lakers, people were comparing him and Jason Tatum. What most people don't give credit to is the simple fact that one person got the green light in their second or third year, and the other person had to get the back seat. If LeBron James went to the Celtics, Jason Tatum wouldn't be the same Jason Tatum. There's a blessing and a curse when you have a superstar talent come to your team and he plays the exact same position you play. You have to take the back seat. And most people who know sports agree with that. In fact, there was an interesting interview about how, just to prove this point, James Harden was mentioned on Podcast P with Paul George and Jalen Green, and how James Harden coming to the Houston Rockets could be a blessing and a curse because it could help them as an organization potentially, but it could also stunt his development. It was a small segment. They only spoke about it for about 2-3 minutes, but it gives you the insight as to like what I'm saying is real. Like, it really is. So when people sit there and they criticize Kyle Kuzma, he's had his ups and downs. Don't get me wrong. But I just saw Jason Tatum do the same thing for 2-3 years in the final straight. Fill up the box score all regular season, and somehow in the playoffs, I think this was his most consistent playoff outside the injury. But even still, like he hasn't proven to be him, in my opinion. And it kind of showed in the results. And Draymond even talked about that as well on his podcast. Not necessarily slandering him, but he talked about the inconsistencies of their play. And one of those things there. So again, I say all that to say there's a lot of hate for Kyle Kuzma that is unnecessary because for what he can do if given the opportunity and the role, like he's come into the role of knowing who he is as a power forward, small forward. And he's playing along Bradley Beal, by the way. He's doing pretty well. I think if even more so, he can do more. I honestly feel like he hasn't peaked at all. I think Jason Tatum is who he is at this point. I think, his handle could get better, stuff like that. But comparing these two players, I think Kyle Kuzma still has more upside and more to gain. And I think we may see Jason Tatum plateau. All that being said, I can see Kyle Kuzma being available, and I can see the Bulls trying to trade for him. And again, Kyle Kuzma is one of those players who can play the 3, can play the 4. At times, he's rotated in center. I'm not saying he dominated that, but at times he has. And I've also seen him play the 2 at times when necessary because he has the handle to do so. Kyle Kuzma is a good player. Again, it's not one of those things where I'm sitting there saying this is going to be our end all be all. But when you talk about playmakers, people who actually help on boards, like get down and actually help Vooch on boards. I don't know why people are fascinated with P. Will. P. Will give you the loudest 4 rebounds you've ever seen. Kyle Kuzma averages 7.8 if I'm being correct. If I think I'm being correct, like if that's your average, that means you've had the games where it's definitely been above consistently. Guess what? I want that player. Kyle Kuzma is young. Even on what he could earn later. I think it's one of those things where it's actually, now I think he has a player option this particular season, the 2023-2024 season. If I'm remembering that correctly, I could be wrong on that. But if that is the case, I still think that that's a valuable thing to pair with Zach. And now you get younger. You now have Zach at 28. I think he is, Kyle Kuzma was about 26, 27. You still have your developing players in P. Will. You still have the other players there. Like you've gotten younger while having some sort of veteran presence in Vooch. And now everyone, like Kyle Kuzma playing along Bradley Beal, who I think is, everyone's compared Zach to him as far as 2 guards in the East. Like, the fact that he's been with that type of player shows me that not only can he play alongside of that, he can complement it really well, and he has no problem being in that type of situation. That when I looked for players to complement Zach, that's what I looked for. I look for players who are already in those type of situations, what they bring to the particular team, and again, are they okay with having another alpha on the team? Kyle Kuzma's okay with having another alpha on the team. He's thrived in that environment because the alpha on the team doesn't play the exact same position he does, and he's not relegated to a bench role. And I think that's the benefit there. But I want to hear your thoughts on that. I've always been big on Kyle Kuzma simply because I saw what happened in his career and I saw how it derailed. Now, there are a couple other trade rumors and stuff like that. And just to go back to the point, what does that mean for the money and stuff like that? Something you would have to work out. However, I can see it adding much benefit. I also saw a very similar player out west because I know most people will say that the Bulls will never trade within a conference, and I kind of get that. Portland Trailblazers being one of them with Jeremy Grant and all of those things, who, again, I think both Kyle Kuzma and Jeremy Grant are either have a player option for this particular season or are going to be restricted free agents after next season. So it's one of those situations where it allows the Bulls to get them, see if it works, re-up them if they deem necessary. It's one of those things where both teams kind of get this one-year rental in both of them. The Portland Trail Blazers would get a little better if they would make that move as far as getting more scoring options and helping Dame and Simons. The Wizards would be in the same situation. Heck, if you really want to be honest, Golden State Warriors would absolutely be freakishly dangerous if they had another mid-range shooter who can get a bucket, play in a half-court set, things of that nature. So all of these things are win-wins for all teams involved. The only thing that really impedes that is kind of money and how that would work. But again, those are one of those things where I don't bog myself down too much with that because I've seen weird things happen with contracts. I've seen players get to teams that people say will never happen, can't happen, the money doesn't work, and all of a sudden, miraculously, the money works. This is not like armchair GMs and that make YouTube videos, and all of us who are not professional GMs. Guess what? That's what we are. Shut up. We don't know how the money works. We don't know. They get real creative with these contracts. If they really want a player and it's beneficial for both teams, they seem it's a win-win, they get it done. And so this is not one of those things where people say, well, how does that money work? Shut up. It don't matter. If it's really beneficial, they're going to make it work. Trust me, it happens in every sport. They're going to make it work. But I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear what you all think. Again, these are some of the trade rumors that I seen that I thought, or well, not necessarily trade rumors, but some potentials that I saw. And then there are some people who have actually mentioned these particular trades before. I think the Bulls even looked into Kyle Kuzma back in January or something of that sort. So, I mean, there is some validity there. But again, I want to hear your thoughts. Who are some people that you would rather the Bulls go after? Who would you want them to actually look into? Throw some names out there. We include that. We should do. I may have to steal something from Hayes and do a mailbag. We should do that. But hit us up on the Discord. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Till next time. Peace.